This roller coaster opened before the First World War, and you can still ride it to this day. In fact, some of the coasters in this video are over 100 years old and have survived fires, floods, earthquakes, you name it. These are the oldest coasters that are out there that you can still ride to this day. Right, let's start in 1930 with two coasters on opposite sides of the world. The first one is Rodelbahn. Now this is one of the oldest steel coasters out there, and actually up until 2012 it didn't even have restraints. Now its name is loosely based on Toboggan Run, but it's got nothing to do with toboggans. Typically it should have 4 people in each car, although if it's bad weather it can only have 2. Right, then over the other side of the world we have Legend over in Arnold's Park. Now this is a wooden coaster, and this one had some severe damage in 1968. It has been rebuilt and retracked many times in its lifetime. Right, go back a little bit further, we go back to 1928, and we've got 2 different coasters this time. First one is Kiddie Coaster. Now this is at Playland Park. According to RCDB, you cannot ride this if you're an adult. And yet I have pictures of adults on this. I don't know if this is a change and it used to support adults. Maybe it's one of those creds we'll never get. And then the other one we've got is Montana Souza. Probably pronouncing that really badly, which is really interesting because this is one of the first and probably only concrete coaster. It's a concrete trough. Initially it had wooden running rails and it now has some steel running rails, and well, you get some cracking views up there. Right, 1927 gave us 3 coasters that are still operating to this day, and the first one is Wildcat at Lake Compounce. Now, this has been rebuilt multiple times and modernised, magnetic brakes, air gates, you know, all the kind of stuff you would expect. But also, apparently, at one point, it had Garfield in the logo. And then we've got Racer over at Kennywood. Now, this is one of 3, maybe 4 Mobius Loop coasters that are still in existence today. If you don't know what that is, if you're from the UK, the Grand National, it's basically where it looks like there's 2 tracks that race against each other, but actually it is one continuous track. So if you leave the station on the left, you come back on the right, and vice versa. It's pretty clever. When you leave the station, you flip around and then you've swapped sides, and then you go along side by side. Now the facade has changed on this one numerous times, and actually it's one of the ones from this era you will see a number of coasters that say do not stand up. I mean, you cannot stand up nowadays because of restraints, but you could back then. Right, the next one is one that I was fortunate enough to get on earlier this year, and that is Cyclone over in Luna Park in New York. Now, this coaster was kind of going into disrepair and almost got scrapped in the 70s, but thankfully it was saved and fully restored. Interestingly, I found something that when it first opened it was 25 cents for a shot, unless it was a Sunday or a bank holiday, and then they charged you 35 cents. So those of you who think that surge pricing is a new thing, apparently it is not. I enjoyed this coaster, great layout, but they've still got the original trains, or close to the original trains, and they're not very comfortable. Those restraints are painful. So if you've been on this one, let me know what you thought. Right, the next 2 coasters share the same name, but they opened a year apart. So the first one is the Giant Dipper over in Belmont Park, and this opened in 1925. Now it's had a few names over the years, and it suffered a fire that claimed the life of its manager in 1955. After falling into disrepair, people were calling for its demolition, but instead it did get restored at the cost of $2 million. Now put that into context, the ride cost $150,000 when it was brand new, which in today's money would have been $2.7 million. So a very expensive ride. The other one that we got with the same name was at Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk and opened a year prior, and after taking only 47 days to construct. Interestingly, the ride manufacturer wanted a ride that had the thrill of a plunge down a mineshaft, a balloon ascent, a parachute jump, airplane acrobatics, a cyclone, a toboggan ride, and a ship in a storm. Oh, and as of this year, it's had 68 million riders. Another ride we got from 1924 is Thunderbolt at Kennywood. Now this one's a little bit different because unlike your typical ride that leaves and goes in a lift hill and straight up, this leaves the station straight into a drop, and the lift hill is further on around the course. Also, apparently, you cannot ride this on your own. You have to have a partner with you. I'm not entirely sure why. Right, the next one is another one that I managed to get on this year, and that is Thunderhawk in Dorney Park. Now, initially, this was a simple out and back coaster. Its layout was changed to have this kind of figure of 8 return, and frustratingly, they added some trim brakes on that return in about 1993, and you notice them. I wasn't that impressed with this coaster, to be brutally honest with you, and those brakes were part of the problem. So again, if you've been on it, let me know what you think. Right, the next one is a coaster that I've ridden many times, and I'm sure many of you have as well, and that is the Big Dipper in Blackpool Pleasure Beach, or Pleasure Beach Resort as they call themselves now. This ride has suffered a number of fires over the year, and currently is grade 2 listed. Now if you don't know what that means, I've got a dedicated video all about that, which I will put up here, but basically they are limited in what they can do with this ride. The station in its current form was designed by Joseph Emberton, which if you know that park, he's a name that pops up quite a lot for a number of the older attractions. And interestingly, there was an American chap known as Richard Rodriguez who spent 23 days consecutively riding this coaster for a world record.
That was the underpass, the tunnel underneath. That wakes me up almost every night. It's so loud. It's just gives you a real jolt. Which
he then beat himself by riding the big one. Right, heading back over to America, we have a coaster known imaginatively as Roller Coaster. Opened in 1921 at Lagoon Park. Now this ride has suffered a lot of damage. It had some flooding damage in the first couple of years, so the footers were impacted. It has had fire damage, which destroyed the station and the lift hill, and it's also built on a fault line. Now, doesn't look like there's been any damage caused by that earthquake, but they have had to adapt the ride to kind of compensate for the fault, basically. I've got a POV of this ride from 10 years ago, and it looks like one of the roughest rides out there. I think it's more likely that just image stabilization was terrible 10 years ago. Apparently this needed 3.5 tons of paint to paint the entire structure. To put that in context, I'm painting my bedroom right now and it's costing me 50 quid a tin. So that must have cost them a small fortune. Right, we go even further back to 1920, and bizarrely we got two rides with the same name, both called Jack Rabbit. The first one was at Kennywood and the second one was at Seabreeze. Now, the Kennywood version was designed by John Miller, who had recently painted wheels underneath the track. Now that's pretty common nowadays. Almost every coaster you can think of has upstock wheels, but at the time that was revolutionary, and it allowed them to do far more exciting things with the coaster because there was less risk of it coming off the track. Now the park released a POV from 1920 claiming it to be the oldest POV ever. And actually you can see here there are just people casually standing on the lift hill as the train goes past. And apparently this ride was designed specifically so that the back row was where it's at most airtime. Now the other Jack Rabbit that opened at Seabreeze, now this only took 8 weeks to build with 120 people building it. And now it's another one that suffered from fire damage and needed to be rebuilt and have new trains multiple times. Interestingly, in 2007 when renovating the station, they found an old sign in the rafters that said pay as you leave. The reason for that apparently is that you used to get a punch card and you would basically get it punched every time you went on the ride, and then you would pay at the end of the day. So apparently theme parks used to give you credit. Right, going back even further to 1914, and we've got a ride in Tivoli Gardens known as Rutschbanen. Now, this ride didn't have any upstock wheels because, as I just said, they hadn't been invented yet. They came a few years later. So this one still has a brakeman that operates the ride. There are a handful of these still around the world. One in the UK as well. I've got a picture here of the park from 1922, and you can see the ride is sitting there over on the left. Now this ride was bombed during World War II to try and break the morale off the locals. They had it back up and running within 25 days. Right, so that takes us all the way back to 1912 and the Scenic Railway over in Luna Park, Australia. Now that is currently the oldest running coaster. Now some of you might think leaps and dips, that coaster is older, but it has been standing but not operating for a few years. So this ride over in Australia is currently the oldest coaster out there. Now interestingly, it's another one that's got that brakeman feature on it, and there's a clip here I found where Tom Scott was interviewing them, and well, they basically went on about how it's a challenge to keep these things running.
And there have been discussions to modernise that control system so that the brakes on the train could be invoked externally. All of these things are on the list and will eventually have to happen.
Right, so what's your thoughts on this? Are these rides historic masterpieces or just museums that happen to move? Let me know your thoughts down below, and if you've been on any of these, I'd love to know if they're any good. As always, I've been Chris, you've been watching Coaster Dad, and I shall see you in the next one. Adios!